If you constantly feel like there is something stuck in your throat, if you're always clearing your throat, always swallowing, always aware of that thick, uncomfortable feeling that never seems to fully go away, then this video was made for you. Because what most people don't realize is that this feeling, this constant presence of mucus in the throat, is not just an annoyance, and it is not something you simply have to live with. It is your body sending a very specific signal, and once you understand what that signal means, the path to actually fixing it becomes a lot clearer. Stay with us until the end of this video, because the real cause is almost never what people assume it is, and the fourth cause we cover is one that surprises almost everyone who hears it. Let's start at the beginning, because before we talk about causes and solutions, it's worth understanding what mucus actually is and why your body makes it in the first place. Mucus is not a sign that something is wrong. It is a normal, essential substance that your body produces every single day. The lining of your throat, nasal passages, sinuses, and lungs all produce mucus as a protective mechanism. Mucus traps particles, bacteria, and other irritants before they can travel deeper into your respiratory system. It keeps the delicate tissue of your airways moist so they can function properly. A healthy body produces and moves mucus constantly, and most of the time you never notice it because it moves so smoothly and efficiently. The problem is not the mucus itself. The problem is when your body starts producing too much of it, when it becomes thicker than normal, or when it stops clearing properly, all of which create that persistent, uncomfortable feeling of something lodged in your throat that no amount of clearing seems to fix. The first and perhaps most common cause of chronic mucus in the throat is something called post-nasal drip. Your sinuses and nasal passages are constantly producing mucus, and normally that mucus drains down the back of your throat in such small amounts and so smoothly that you never feel it. But when the nasal passages become irritated or inflamed, they start producing significantly more mucus than usual, and that excess mucus drips down the back of the throat in larger amounts, creating that feeling of something sitting at the back of your throat that you constantly need to swallow or clear. Postnasal drip can be triggered by seasonal allergies, dust, pollen, pet dander, mold, air pollution, sudden changes in temperature or humidity, and even certain foods. What makes postnasal drip so frustrating is that it often continues long after the initial trigger has passed, because the inflammatory response in the nasal passages can linger for weeks or even months. Many people who assume they simply have a persistent cold are actually dealing with chronic postnasal drip from unidentified allergies or environmental irritants they're exposed to every single day. The second cause is acid reflux, and this one is particularly important to understand because it's one of the most commonly missed explanations for chronic throat mucus. Most people associate acid reflux with heartburn, that burning sensation in the chest. But there is a form of acid reflux called laryngopharyngeal reflux, sometimes referred to as silent reflux, where stomach acid travels all the way up into the throat and voice box without ever producing the classic heartburn sensation. When stomach acid reaches the throat repeatedly, it irritates the delicate tissue lining the throat and voice box, and the body responds by producing extra mucus as a protective mechanism. The result is that constant feeling of mucus or thickness in the throat, often accompanied by a chronic need to clear the throat, a slightly hoarse voice, or the sensation of something stuck that doesn't go away no matter how much you swallow. Silent reflux is called silent precisely because so many of its symptoms seem unrelated to digestion, which is exactly why it goes unrecognized for so long in so many people. If you consistently feel worse in the morning when you first wake up, or after meals, or when you lie down, acid reflux may be playing a significant role in your throat mucus problem. The third cause worth discussing in detail is dairy consumption, and this is a topic where there is genuine ongoing conversation among medical and nutritional experts. The connection between dairy and mucus has been debated for decades, and while the science doesn't support the idea that dairy directly causes the body to produce more mucus, many people notice a subjective thickening of mucus after consuming milk, cheese, or other dairy products. The likely explanation is that the proteins and fat content in dairy can temporarily change the consistency and texture of existing mucus, making it feel thicker and more present even if the actual volume hasn't increased significantly. For people who already have some degree of postnasal drip, acid reflux, or another underlying cause of throat mucus, dairy can amplify the feeling considerably. If you notice that your throat mucus consistently feels worse after dairy, reducing your intake or experimenting with dairy alternatives is a reasonable and low-risk step worth trying. The fourth cause, and the one that surprises the most people, is dehydration. Not severe dehydration, not the kind where you feel dizzy and exhausted, but the low-grade, chronic mild dehydration that is extraordinarily common among adults who simply don't drink enough water throughout the day. When the body is mildly dehydrated, mucus in the throat and airways becomes thicker and stickier than it would otherwise be. Thin, well-hydrated mucus moves efficiently and clears easily. Thick, dehydrated mucus sits and accumulates, creating exactly that sensation of something permanently lodged in the throat that no amount of clearing fully resolves. The reason this surprises people is because most people feel like they drink plenty of fluids, often because they count coffee, tea, and other beverages. But caffeine is mildly diuretic, meaning it causes the body to excrete more fluid than it retains, and many common beverages don't provide the same level of hydration as plain water. If your throat mucus is consistently worse in the afternoon or after consuming multiple caffeinated drinks, dehydration is very likely a contributing factor, and the solution is as simple as significantly increasing your plain water intake throughout the day. Beyond these four primary causes, there are several other factors that can contribute to chronic throat mucus that deserve mention. Smoking and exposure to secondhand smoke is one of the most significant, as the irritants in smoke directly stimulate mucus production in the respiratory tract as a protective response and simultaneously impair the tiny hair-like structures called cilia that are responsible for moving mucus up and out of the airways. When cilia function is impaired by smoke exposure, mucus accumulates rather than clearing naturally. Even people who stopped smoking years ago may notice that their airways still produce more mucus than average, as recovery of full ciliary function can take considerable time. Air quality in general plays a more significant role in throat mucus than most people appreciate. Indoor air quality, in particular, is often worse than outdoor air quality in many homes, largely because of factors like dust accumulation, pet dander, mold in humid areas, off-gassing from synthetic carpets and furniture, and inadequate ventilation. People who spend most of their time indoors, which describes the majority of adults, are continuously breathing air that may contain irritants at levels that steadily stimulate mucus production without ever causing an obvious acute reaction. Improving ventilation, using an air purifier with a HEPA filter, keeping humidity levels in a healthy range, and reducing dust accumulation can all make a meaningful difference for people whose throat mucus seems to worsen at home compared to when they are outdoors or in different environments. Certain medications can also increase mucus production or affect its consistency, and this is something many people are never told when a prescription is written. Some blood pressure medications, antihistamines, and other commonly used drugs can either directly affect mucus production or cause dryness in one part of the airway that prompts compensatory mucus production in another area. If your throat mucus problem developed or worsened around the time you started a new medication, mentioning this to your doctor is worthwhile, as there may be alternatives worth considering. Food sensitivities beyond dairy are another underexplored area. Gluten sensitivity, for example, triggers an inflammatory response in some individuals that can manifest in a variety of ways, including increased mucus production in the throat and nasal passages. Certain food additives, artificial colors, and preservatives found in processed foods have also been reported by some people to worsen their mucus symptoms, though this area of research is still developing. Keeping a simple food diary and noting whether your mucus symptoms feel better or worse after consuming certain foods can be a surprisingly revealing exercise. Something else worth discussing is how hormonal changes, particularly in women going through perimenopause or menopause, can affect mucus production and consistency throughout the body. The hormonal shifts that occur during this period affect many mucous membrane tissues, sometimes causing dryness in some areas and increased mucus production in others. Women who notice that their throat mucus symptoms began or worsened during their 40s or 50s without any other obvious explanation may find that hormonal changes are a contributing factor worth exploring with their doctor. Stress and anxiety also deserve mention here, and not just in a vague, general way. Chronic stress activates the body's stress response system, which can affect the nervous system's control over mucus-producing glands. Some people notice a direct correlation between periods of high stress or anxiety and worsening throat mucus. Additionally, anxiety itself can heighten awareness of normal bodily sensations, meaning that a level of throat mucus that would otherwise go completely unnoticed can become the focus of significant attention and discomfort during periods of heightened anxiety. This doesn't mean the sensation is imaginary. It simply means that the perception of the problem can be amplified by mental state, making it feel more severe than it actually is from a physical standpoint. Let's talk about practical steps, because understanding the causes matters most when it translates into real changes. The first and most universally applicable step is to significantly increase your daily water intake. 8 to 10 glasses of plain water daily, spread throughout the day rather than consumed all at once, is a foundational change that helps thin mucus and support its natural clearance from the throat. The second step is to consider whether you may be experiencing post-nasal drip from allergies or environmental triggers, since identifying and reducing exposure to those triggers can make a substantial difference relatively quickly. Nasal rinses using saline, which are widely available and simple to use, can help flush irritants from the nasal passages and reduce post-nasal drip significantly for many people. The third step is to honestly assess your diet, particularly your dairy intake, and whether you've noticed any pattern between certain foods and worsening throat symptoms. The fourth step is to consider acid reflux as a possible cause, particularly if you experience any degree of digestive symptoms or if your throat mucus is noticeably worse in the morning or after meals. Elevating the head of your bed slightly, avoiding eating within 2 to 3 hours of lying down, and reducing intake of commonly reflux-triggering foods like spicy food, coffee, carbonated drinks, and fried foods, are all reasonable initial steps that don't require medication. If these changes don't bring noticeable improvement, speaking with a doctor about the possibility of silent reflux is the right next step. The fifth step involves looking honestly at your environment, particularly your home. If you have carpets that haven't been deep cleaned recently, if you have pets and don't vacuum frequently, if your home feels dusty or musty in any area, or if you've noticed your symptoms are consistently worse at home than elsewhere, your indoor air quality is very likely contributing. Running an air purifier, opening windows to increase ventilation, and addressing any sources of mold or persistent dampness are all practical steps worth taking. It's also worth mentioning that chronic throat clearing itself can become a problem that compounds the original issue. When people clear their throat repeatedly, the friction and force can actually irritate the throat tissue further, prompting additional mucus production as a protective response. This can create a cycle where the throat clearing that feels necessary is actually making the underlying condition slightly worse. Speech therapists and ear, nose, and throat doctors often recommend suppressing the urge to forcefully clear the throat and instead trying a silent swallow or a gentle cough, which is far less irritating to the tissue and doesn't stimulate the same protective mucus response. Before wrapping up, it's important to say clearly that while most causes of chronic throat mucus are benign and very manageable with lifestyle and dietary adjustments, there are situations where persistent throat symptoms should be evaluated by a doctor. If your mucus is consistently discolored, particularly if it's yellow, green, or has blood in it, if you have persistent pain when swallowing, if you notice unexplained voice changes that don't resolve, or if you have throat symptoms accompanied by unexplained weight loss or significant fatigue, these are signs worth discussing with a healthcare professional sooner rather than later. This video is for general educational awareness and is not a substitute for personalized medical evaluation and advice. If this video helped you finally understand what's been happening in your throat, please share it with someone you know who has been dealing with the same frustrating problem, because this is information most people never receive until they specifically go looking for it. If this video was useful to you, please like it and subscribe to the channel so more videos like this can reach you every day.